In my previous life, as my sister lay on her deathbed, she begged me with trembling hands to take care of her children. I was powerless to refuse. In the end, I married her husband and became stepmother to those little ones, pouring every ounce of my heart into raising them. Yet all my devotion was met with suspicion and cruelty as they painted me as a scheming woman, hungry for their family's fortune. They drained me of every bit of worth I had and then watched cold-eyed as illness took my life. In my final moments, they mocked me, saying that a woman as wicked as I deserved such an ending. That was my past life. This time, I refuse to bow to such injustice. I will live for myself. I will pursue the life I have always dreamed of. In the doctor's office, the physician's voice was heavy with regret as he told my family that the patient's time was short, that they should spend these last moments with her and help her fulfill her final wishes. My mother began to sob softly. My brother-in-law's eyes turned red as he forced himself to keep his composure. To an outsider, we must have looked like a family bound by deep love and unshakable unity. In my last life, I was naive enough to believe that too. When I stepped back into the hospital room, my sister was lying there frail and small, with her mother-in-law at her side and her 2 young children clinging to her. It was clear from everyone's faces that she already knew the truth about her condition. My mother smiled weakly and asked if she wanted anything special to eat tomorrow when she was discharged. At that, my sister's eyes filled with tears. "The doctor told you, didn't he? I'm going to die, aren't I?" The word die seemed to shatter the air. Her children broke into loud, wrenching sobs that sliced through the quiet. My sister turned to me, tears streaming down her cheeks, calling my name. I went to her side and she gripped my hand tightly. "Samantha," she whispered, "I don't want to die. What will happen to Lucas and Emma? They're so young. I can't leave them." Her thin body trembled, worn down by the relentless assault of cancer and the endless rounds of chemotherapy. The desperate plea in her eyes is something I will never forget. In my past life, this was the day she asked me to marry her husband to take her place and raise her children. Back then, I wanted no part of it. But the earnestness in her voice, the tearful persuasion from relatives, and the pitiful faces of the children broke me. I gave in. And that decision opened the door to a life of misery. This time, after seeing the true cruelty of her husband's family, I will never let myself walk into that trap again. I patted her hand gently and spoke softly. "Daniel is a good man. I'm sure he will take care of the children. And there's Mom and Dad and so many other relatives. You don't have to worry." She shook her head, tears sliding down her face. "Daniel is rough. He doesn't know how to care for children. Our parents are too old. I can't bear to burden them. Samantha, I can only count on you. For the sake of our sisterhood, you must help me. It is because of that sisterhood that I stand here now. I understand a parent's heart, the fear of leaving children behind. But why must my life be the sacrifice? In my past life, I let her speak those words until I could no longer say no. In this life, I will not give her the chance. This morning, I came early, determined to persuade her to give up the idea altogether. Years ago, our parents told me that a girl's education wasn't worth much, that it was better to marry early. But my sister had stood firmly by my side, insisting I continue my studies, even against our parents' will. No matter how vile Daniel's family proved to be in my last life, I can't lay all the blame on her. She left this world too soon to see what they became. But the bitter truth remains unchanged. I reached the hospital room door and paused when I heard her mother-in-law's voice. "You say your sister is honest, but judging by her attitude yesterday, once you're gone, she won't care at all about Emma and Lucas." Daniel's voice followed, cold and matter-of-fact. "If she won't agree to be stepmother, how am I as a man supposed to raise 2 kids? I'll have to remarry. Who knows how a new wife will treat them?" My sister's voice was weak, pleading. "Let me try to talk to Samantha one more time. ChatGPT Danai." From the other side of the door, I could hear my sister's voice, fragile and unsure. "She's listened to me since we were little. I'm sure she'll agree," she said, but there was no real confidence in her tone. Her mother-in-law let out a dry, cruel laugh. "Why waste so many words? I brought something very useful from back home. It's breeding medicine for cattle, works strong and fast. Even the most virtuous person will turn into a lust-driven fool after drinking it. Once that happens, everything will be settled and she won't be able to refuse becoming his wife." Daniel laughed loudly, the sound cutting through me like ice. "Mother, you're brilliant. I love this idea." My sister hesitated, her voice faltering. But Isn't that too much? Daniel's tone turned cold. Whether it's sooner or later, she's going to be my wife anyway. What's the difference? But if you don't want to go through with it, that's fine. Just remember, when some other stepmother abuses your kids, it won't be my problem. My sister's voice trembled as she finally gave in. All right, I agree. Standing frozen outside, I felt the blood drain from my face, my whole body cold. I didn't hesitate. I turned and bought a bus ticket straight back to campus. In my last life, I had been foolish enough to agree letting them force me to quit school so I could care for their family. The regret of never finishing my education haunted me until my death. This time, no one would take my dream away. Lately, my sister's family had been calling nonstop, saying she didn't have much time left, asking me to come care for her. Whatever bond we once had was long worn down to nothing. Against personal interests, blood ties mean little. I almost felt grateful to them for helping me see people's true nature so clearly. I juggled my classes and part-time work, recently taking on an extra job. I knew that once my sister passed, they'd try again to force me into that role, and my refusal would unleash a storm I might not escape. One evening after a long day, my body was so drained I could barely stand. I straightened up from stocking shelves and a wave of dizziness hit me. My legs wobbled. Then a steady hand caught my arm. I turned and saw a familiar face, Michael Anderson. Concern and compassion filled his eyes. Are you okay? Do you need to sit down for a bit? I forced a small smile and shook my head. I'm fine, probably just stood up too fast. He studied me for a moment before asking quietly, Do you need money that badly? Working yourself to death everywhere like this? I gave a weak laugh, trying to hide my exhaustion. In my last life after I quit school, he had come all the way to my hometown to find me. When he learned I had given up my studies just to become a stepmother for Daniel, his disappointment was written all over his face. He told me then, if it's just about money, I can help you. You don't have to throw your life away like this. But I, stubborn and naive, thought sacrificing for family was noble. When he left, his face carried disappointment, hurt, and something like regret. Looking back now, I wonder if he had feelings for me even then. As he was leaving the store that night, he looked over his shoulder and said, Samantha, if you ever run into trouble, come find me. I smiled faintly and said, All right, this time I would not turn away from his kindness. The next day, word came from home that my sister was nearing the end. I checked the calendar. She had died in the afternoon in my previous life. I booked a bus for that very time, deliberately choosing the longest route so I would arrive late. I didn't want to give her the chance to ask anything of me. I didn't want to endure relatives' icy judgment calling me heartless. By the time I reached Daniel's hometown, the funeral hall was already set. I hurried to my sister's coffin and threw myself against it, crying loudly, Rebecca, I'm here. Why couldn't you wait for me just a little longer? If only I had bought an earlier ticket, I could have seen you one last time. Don't worry, I'll take care of Mom, Dad, and the kids. My sobbing drew relatives over to comfort me. My parents looked displeased at my late arrival, but held their tongues. I knelt beside Lucas and Emma, burning paper offerings, tears streaming down my cheeks. Not from grief, but from the sting of the smoke. The children soon grew bored and wandered off, but I stayed there all day, the picture of a devoted sister. Then Helen Carter approached with a steaming bowl of chicken soup, her voice dripping with false concern. Samantha, you must be tired. Don't overwork yourself. I made this to help you recover your strength. I took the bowl in my hands, pretending I might drink, and saw the eager glint in her eyes. I didn't believe for a second that she meant me well, so I called Lucas over. Emma, your grandmother made this for you. You're growing, so you should drink it to stay healthy. The child's face lit up at the mention of chicken soup, but Helen quickly pushed his hand away. This is for your aunt, not you. Don't be selfish. Lucas's lips quivered as if he might cry. I stroked his head. It's okay, honey. I'll let you have it. Don't cry. I brought the bowl closer to him, but Helen snatched it away so fast the hot broth splashed onto my hand, leaving a burning sting. I frowned, unable to hide my irritation. It's just a bowl of soup. If the child wants it, let him drink it. Why make such a fuss? My voice carried enough for everyone nearby to hear. Faces turned toward us. Helen hurried to explain. It's not that I won't share. It's just too hot right now. I'll give it to him when it cools. But I could see the frustration in her eyes. She pulled Lucas away, muttering curses under her breath. I knew then her little plan had failed. Helen's eyes were fixed on the bowl of chicken soup, the eagerness in her expression impossible to hide. I had been right. There was nothing good in her intentions. I called Lucas over with a smile that masked my suspicion. Emma, your grandmother made this for you. You're growing, you should drink it to stay strong. The little boy's eyes lit up, his small hand reaching for the bowl, but Helen quickly shoved it away. This is for your aunt to help her recover. You don't understand. Lucas's lips quivered in frustration, and I reached out to comfort him. It's okay, sweetheart. I'll let you drink it all. Don't cry. I brought the bowl toward him, ready to feed him myself. But Helen snatched it from my hands so quickly that hot broth spilled over my skin, burning it red. My brows knit, my voice cool but loud enough for the nearby mourners to hear. It's just a bowl of soup. If the child wants it, let him have it. Why make such a scene? All eyes turned toward us. Helen stammered, It's not that I won't share, it's just too hot. I'll give it to him when it cools. But her irritation was clear as she yanked Lucas away, muttering under her breath. Drink, 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 just like your mother, lazy and greedy, always ruining my plans. That day was Rebecca's burial. For 2 days I had avoided eating or drinking anything they handed me, wary of their tricks. Once the funeral was over, exhaustion hit me like a wave. My mother saw me stumbling and told me to rest for a while. I agreed, knowing I had to be awake later for the night ceremony at the grave. I must have drifted into a deep sleep because the next thing I felt was something heavy pressing down on me, stealing my breath. I jolted awake to the shadow of a man leaning over me, his hands clawing at my clothes. The stench of alcohol poured from his mouth with every labored breath. I tried to scream, but a rough hand clamped over my lips. My mind went blank with fear. I struggled, kicking, shoving, but my strength was nothing compared to his. The sound of fabric tearing filled the air. His wet, disgusting kisses trailed from my neck downward, making my stomach churn. I forced myself to think, to find a way out. My hand slid to my pocket where I remembered stashing a small packet of chili powder. He seemed to think I had given up lifting his head to make his next move. That was my chance. I squeezed my eyes shut and flung the powder into his face. His scream tore through the dark, and his grip on my mouth loosened. I shoved him off, and my vision adjusting, aimed a hard kick straight between his legs. His howl of pain was almost satisfying. I scrambled to my feet, yanked my clothes back into place, grabbed my phone, and ran shouting at the top of my lungs, "Help, someone help me, there's an intruder." My cries brought the whole family and half the neighbors rushing in. My mother stepped forward, her face twisted in irritation rather than concern. "Samantha, what on earth are you screaming about?" Her coldness hit me harder than the attack itself. She had to know what had just happened. My disheveled clothes, my terrified face. Yet she chose to look away. I burst into tears, my voice breaking. "Mom, I was asleep when a man came in and tried to hurt me. It didn't need to be said outright. Anyone looking at me could understand. But instead of standing by me, she dismissed it. You must have been sleepwalking. There are no men in this house." I stared at her, my voice firm. "He's still here." I threw chili powder in his eyes. "If you don't believe me, go check." Whispers rippled through the crowd. This was no small matter. People began suggesting we search the house. Before they could move, Helen hurried out, forcing a laugh. "Oh, it's a misunderstanding. It was Daniel. He just came to call her for dinner and she overreacted." I froze, my heart pounding as the truth sank in. "What? It was Daniel," he dared. My words dissolved into sobs. "Mom, how could he do this when my sister just died?" Margaret couldn't stand to hear another word and cut me off sharply. "Enough. He was just calling you for dinner. Stop imagining things." I looked down at the state of my torn clothes. "But my clothes?" Before I could finish, Robert exploded, his voice booming. "Shut up. Stop spewing nonsense and trying to disgrace this family. Get inside now." His hand cracked across my face so hard that the left side went numb, and my vision went dark for a moment. Helen stepped forward, then her tone falsely gentle as she grabbed my arm. "Samantha, your sister just passed. Don't make a scene. It's just a misunderstanding. Let's go inside and talk." I knew better. No matter what excuse they came up with, they would not forgive me for what I had just done to Daniel. I thrashed against their hands, shouting, "I'm not going in there. There's a predator in that house. Somebody help me." The neighbors looked at each other, unsure whose side to take in a story, with two completely different versions. Margaret joined in, pulling me toward the door, her voice pitched just right for the crowd. "I'm her mother. Do you really think I would harm my own daughter? Her sister just died, they were close, and now she's so distraught she's imagining things." I fought harder desperation, lending me strength, because I knew if they got me inside, I might never get out again. Just as my body was about to be forced through the doorway, a wall of navy uniforms and polished shoes pushed through the crowd. "What's going on here? Who called this in?" one of the officers asked. I tore myself free, rushed forward, and clung to an officer's leg, my tears falling fast. "Please help me. There's a man. He tried to assault me." The sight of me clinging to the officer seemed to galvanize them. Within minutes, Daniel was dragged from the house and shoved into the back of a squad car, like a criminal caught in the act. Whatever reputation he had cultivated as a good man was in ruins. At the station, I gave my statement and submitted to a medical exam. The evidence of my struggle was clear, and there was no way for him to deny it. Under pressure, he confessed to attempting to force himself on me and admitted that the whole family had been conspiring to make me his wife by any means necessary. They were afraid I wouldn't agree, so they decided to take the gamble, either everything or nothing. The truth left the officers looking at me with pity and disbelief. They could not comprehend how my own parents had played a part in such a plan. Even though I was used to their coldness, I let myself look devastated, tears slipping down my cheeks without end. Both families had been brought in, yet they still hurled insults at me, their voices echoing through the station. I stayed silent, letting their ugliness show itself. When the case reached mediation, Helen had the gall to say, "My son was just drunk, he didn't do anything. If it's that big a deal, let him marry the girl and we'll be done with it." The mediator's face hardened. "If you can't take this seriously, we will pursue criminal charges and your son will go to prison." The mention of prison sent a ripple of fear through them. They turned to me, switching from threats to pleading. "If Daniel is jailed, what will happen to Lucas and Emma? Your family, how can you be so heartless?" Margaret joined in, her voice sharp. "Tell the police you're dropping it or don't call me your mother again." In the end, it was settled that Daniel would publicly apologize to the entire town for his plot, effectively ending any hope they had of forcing me into that role. I also demanded a payment of $5,000. At first, they cursed me for it, but when I said I'd hand the money to my parents, as a gesture of filial piety, their tone softened instantly. The truth was, I didn't care about the money. I saw it as the price of peace, a way to buy them out of my life for good. Back at school, I vowed not to return home anytime soon. Time passed and I entered my final year of college, my days filled with internship hours and preparation for graduate school exams. My relationship with Michael grew steadier, though I kept my guard high. For 2 years, I used my finances as an excuse to avoid going home. But this time, my parents seemed determined. They warned that if I didn't come back, they would show up on campus. Knowing how easily they could create a scene that might jeopardize my enrollment, I agreed to make the trip. Before I left, a neighbor messaged me on Facebook saying Daniel had been visiting my parents frequently. The news only deepened my suspicion that they were plotting something. That evening, I had dinner with Michael Anderson at the campus cafeteria. He gently placed my favorite piece of rib into my bowl and asked softly, "What's wrong? You don't look happy." I looked up at him and said quietly, "I'm planning to go back to my hometown tomorrow." His hand froze midair, the chopstick still holding a piece of meat. His voice was filled with concern when he asked, "Why the sudden trip home?" I had never hidden my family background from him, and he had never once looked down on me for it. He always respected my pride, choosing to take me to simple places for dates, either the cafeteria or modest little restaurants, so I wouldn't feel pressured by the difference in our circumstances. My parents called me back. "I think something's going on," I said. His brows knitted in worry. "You're so busy right now. Can't it wait until the summer break?" I shook my head. "I've already asked for leave. It's just that..." I hesitated for a moment before adding, "If I go back and you can't reach me, please call the police." The moment those words left my mouth, he straightened up, his expression tense. "No way. If you think there's danger, I'm going with you." My chest loosened a little. Maybe having a reliable boyfriend like Michael was God's way of compensating me for the unfairness I'd endured. The next day I went home. My parents, hearing I was back, prepared an unusually lavish meal, something rare in our household. Looking at the table filled with dishes, I was certain they had an agenda. As my mother picked food into my bowl, she said in an overly tender voice, "It's been so long since you've been home. We've missed you. Now that you're here, my heart feels at ease." I had no patience for this charade of loving parents and dutiful daughter. "School has been hectic. You insisted I come back, so what's going on?" I have to return right after. My father slammed his chopsticks down on the table. After all these years of studying, you've become useless. You've been gone so long and now you want to leave the moment you arrive. What do you think your mother and I can rely on when we're old? His voice rose. This time you're not leaving. You're over 20 and still unmarried. We've found someone for you. His conditions are perfect for you. Get married quickly and live nearby so you can take care of us. I didn't argue. I just asked about the man's background and learned the groom's family was offering a dowry of $30,000. So that was it, they were rushing to sell me off for money. The next morning, the man's family came to our house. The moment I saw him, I understood everything. He was short, weighed close to 200 pounds, and his eyes were dull and lifeless. His mother looked me up and down like she was appraising an item at the market, then scoffed. She's much skinnier than the matchmaker said. A body like that won't bear children easily. My son is the only male heir for 3 generations. The wife we choose must give us many grandsons. Once you marry him, you'll treat him like he's the most important person in the world. You'll take care of him and, of course, follow my instructions. I can't stand a mouthy daughter-in-law. And your family only has 1 child, you. I'm not heartless. You can visit your parents, but you can't bring money from our home to them. Even the money you earn yourself stays in this family. I smiled and said evenly, "Why don't you let your son tell me these things himself?" Her face flickered with a trace of embarrassment. "My boy's shy. It's the same if I say it." I tilted my head. Really? Or is it because he's mentally impaired and can't say it even if he wanted to? I had told Michael about this the day before. He did some digging and discovered the truth. The man had suffered a severe fever as a child that caused brain damage. His mental capacity was that of a small child. Still, as the only son, he was spoiled to the point that he couldn't take care of himself. The marriage they wanted was nothing more than finding him a free full-time caretaker. Their so-called good conditions came from government compensation after their land was seized. Before that, they couldn't even afford a proper dowry for someone in a similar situation. When I said this aloud, the woman's face twisted in anger. "My son just has a simple personality. He's not stupid." I turned to him and asked, "I'm treating you today. What would you like to eat?" His face lit up instantly, his tiny eyes disappearing into slits as he grinned. "Fried chicken." I was sitting at the table watching him devour, a chicken drumstick juice running down his chin, as if it were the finest thing he had ever tasted. I glanced at my adoptive parents and let out a cold, humorless laugh. "This is the man you think is good enough for me?" I asked. Before they could answer, I continued, "If you really want me to marry him, it's not impossible. But the dowry needs to be doubled. And since your precious son can't spend his whole life stuck in this small town, you'll have to buy a place in the city at least 1,500 square feet. And when we get married, you'll move to the city with us so you can enjoy life there too." My adoptive parents exchanged quick looks. My father's brows pulled together, but then his expression eased as if my demands were perfectly reasonable. Before today, they had no idea what kind of man he was, so they thought $200,000 was enough. Now my conditions sounded justified, but when his mother heard my terms, she nearly jumped out of her seat. What a $300,000 dowry doubled. "Do you think you're made of gold? There are plenty of women who'd marry my son for much less. And a city apartment, keep dreaming." She grabbed her son by the arm and stormed out. The man just kept muttering, "Drumstick. Mom, where's my drumstick?" Once they were gone, I turned to my adoptive parents. "So was it 200,000 or 300,000? My father's face turned red with anger. That jerk Daniel Carter dared to cheat us. "I'm going to find him right now." He bolted out the door. My mother hesitated, then sighed. "Samantha, $300,000 is a lot of money. The guy might be a little slow, but he won't make your life miserable. You could marry him, and if it doesn't work out, just divorce him in a couple of years." I let out a bitter laugh. "So your plan is to sell me once, then divorce me so you can sell me again." "But Mom, what if I divorce him and his family sues to get the dowry back? The law says it has to be returned." She froze. "What?" "That's ridiculous. My precious daughter touched by another man and they want their money back. No way." I clenched my fist, holding back the disgust boiling inside me. "Whether you like it or not, the law is the law. Don't forget someone almost went to prison over this exact thing not too long ago." She pouted but finally muttered, "Fine. But whoever spends the money should be the one to pay it back." I could see hesitation in her eyes, so I pressed on. Do you even know how much a college graduate earns in the city? Around $8,000 a month, almost $96,000 a year. And that's just starting pay. If I get my master's degree, it's $10,000 a month right out of the gate. In big cities, the dowry for a well-educated bride can easily be $500,000. Plus, my future husband would be someone capable, someone who actually makes money, not some fool who wastes everything he has. She looked half intrigued, half doubtful. That sounds nice, but if you don't give me money, it's useless to me. I gave her a faint smile. Why wouldn't I? You're my mother. If I don't support you, you could sue me and you'd win. Just ask around, you'll see I'm right. The truth was, I just needed time. Once I graduated and had my own career, even if they tried to sue me later, all they'd get would be the legal minimum for parental support. Nothing more. That evening, as I sat in my room booking a ticket back to school, my mother burst in, her face pale. Samantha, something's happened to your father. On the way to the hospital, I learned that Robert Brown had been in a motorcycle accident. By the time we arrived, he was in surgery. A couple of traffic officers were talking to the driver involved, a man who had been driving a private car. At least that meant his insurance would cover the hospital bills. Without it, I dreaded to think how far my mother would go to squeeze the money out of me. The moment my mother heard the driver was outside, she rushed over to him, tears streaming down her face. How could you drive like that? Were you trying to kill him? My husband's the only breadwinner in our family. If something happens to him, how will we survive? The man's patience was clearly wearing thin, but he still kept his voice calm. Your husband was driving against traffic and hit my car. He's the one at fault, but my mother wouldn't hear it. I don't care. You hit him, so you're responsible. If he can't work anymore, you'll have to support our whole family. Eventually, the traffic officers had to pull her away before she made things worse. After surgery, my father was moved to the ICU. The doctor said that if he walked out alive, it would be a miracle. 2 days later, that miracle didn't come. My father died. My mother saw an opportunity. She demanded $1 million in compensation from the driver. Predictably, he refused. The hospital bills alone had been nearly $100,000, which his insurance had agreed to cover as a gesture of goodwill. But since Robert Brown had been drunk and driving against traffic, the legal responsibility was entirely his. Seeing that the compensation dispute might drag on, I told Michael Anderson to head back first. He didn't feel comfortable leaving me alone, but I knew I couldn't risk my mother finding out about him. Eventually, the settlement was finalized at $200,000. Of course, my mother was far from satisfied, but the driver was firm and refused to take the matter to court. With her limited education, arguing a legal case was out of the question, let alone hiring a lawyer. The moment she heard it would cost money to sue, she dropped the idea entirely. At my father's funeral, my brother-in-law Daniel Carter and his family naturally showed up. The moment he saw me, he started with his sarcastic remarks. Well, if it isn't the youngest sister, the college student, how many years has it been since you visited your parents? He shook his head with mock pity. Guess all that education made you forget what filial piety is. Poor old man worked his whole life and didn't even get to enjoy a single day before passing away. Then he dabbed the corner of his eye with his sleeve, though there wasn't a single tear on his face. I still hadn't confronted him about trying to marry me off to a man with a mental disability. Yet here he was, shamelessly poking at my wounds. My chest burned with fury. I bit my lip, forcing tears into my eyes, then pointed straight at him. You have the nerve to show your face here. It was you. You're the one who killed my father. His expression froze and he stammered. What nonsense are you talking about? He had an accident. What does that have to do with me? I lunged forward, grabbing him by the collar, my voice rising. It was you. You introduced me to that man, didn't you? And you told his family the bride price was $300,000, but you told my parents it was only $200,000. You cheated my father. He went to confront you about it, and right after leaving your house, the accident happened. And you never took responsibility. He tried to push back, but I wouldn't give him the chance. My father drank at your house, and you still let him drive home. That's negligence. That's on you. I swore to myself that once my father was buried, I would sue him even if I had to borrow the money to do it. The moment his mother heard me say that, she rushed over to shield her son. Are you insane? Your father's death has nothing to do with our family. Don't you dare try to pin it on us. You won't get a dime. She was bigger and stronger than me, so I couldn't overpower her physically. I raised my voice and called for my mother. Mom, Dad is gone, and their family is responsible. They have to pay compensation. We can't just let this go. The moment she heard compensation, my mother's attitude changed instantly. She got up and stood beside me, ready to argue. I kept my grip on Daniel's collar, refusing to let go. That's when his two kids rushed over, their small fists pounding against me. "You ugly witch! You killed my grandma, and now you're bullying my dad. I'll beat you to death," the older one shouted. "Let go of my dad, you witch!" I looked down at the two of them, surprised at how much they'd grown since I'd last seen them. When they realized their punches weren't doing any damage, the older one lunged forward, mouth wide open, ready to bite my leg. I lifted my foot and shoved, sending him tumbling to the ground, where he burst into loud wails. Their grandfather saw me lay hands on his grandson, his face turning purple with rage as he prepared to charge at me. Luckily, relatives who had come to pay respects quickly stepped in and held him back. The chaos only settled after a long round of persuasion, but I had no intention of letting the matter slide. Before leaving, I fixed my gaze on Daniel and said coldly, "Once my father is buried, we'll finish this." After the funeral, a respected elder in the family sought me out. It turned out Daniel, worried I would actually take him to court, had asked someone to mediate. The moment we sat down, he put on a remorseful face and spoke in a contrite tone. "Uncles, aunts, I've been thinking a lot these past few days. I know I bear some responsibility for my father-in-law's death. It was my fault for not stopping him, but I didn't dare say too much at the time. I was afraid he'd be upset. I never thought things would turn out this way. If I had known, I would have done everything in my power to stop him." A few elders nodded, seeming to accept that he might have a point. But if he thought a few words of regret were going to settle things, he was delusional. I shot back. "You think a few sentences of fake remorse are enough? My father was the sole provider for our family. Now that he's gone, I'm still in school. How is my mother supposed to survive? Who's going to take care of her?" Right on cue, my mother joined in, her voice trembling in practiced sorrow. "I have such a tragic fate. First I lost my daughter and now my husband. How am I supposed to live?" Daniel quickly stood and went over to her, feigning the perfect son-in-law. "Mom, even though Rebecca is gone, I'm still your son-in-law." Michael had suggested it before, and now that my father was gone, he brought it up again. "Samantha still needs to finish school," he said gently. "If Mom stays alone, she'll be lonely. Why don't you come live with us? You're Lucas and Emma's grandmother and family to me as well. I'll take good care of you." The elders present all nodded approvingly, seeing him as a dutiful, respectful man who knew how to honor his elders. My mother seemed pleased with the idea, thinking that living with her grandchildren, having someone to look after her, and still keeping the compensation money from my father's death meant she would want for nothing. But I felt differently. Inside I was laughing coldly, but outwardly I wore a mask of reluctance. "No, I don't agree," I said flatly. My mother immediately shot back. "And who are you to decide? If I think it's fine, then it's fine." The other elders joined in. "Samantha, you're not even home most of the time. If Daniel is willing to take care of your mother, it's a good thing. Don't make a fuss." I lowered my head and pretended to be angry. But inside I was celebrating. I didn't care about my father's compensation, but if my mother insisted on living with me, it would be nothing but trouble. Since Daniel was willing to take her in, it was perfect. I was curious to see how two selfish and manipulative people would manage under the same roof. That evening, I deliberately went to her room. "Mom, about Dad's compensation money." Her eyes instantly sharpened. "What about it? This is my money. Don't even think about touching it." I laughed quietly to myself and replied in a soft tone, "Mom, what are you thinking? How could I ever take your money? I just wanted to remind you it's yours alone. Use it for yourself and don't give it to anyone else. Best to put it in a fixed-term account. The interest rate will be higher." Back at school, I buried myself in my studies, but Michael was still worried after hearing about the forced engagement to that simpleton. He even brought his parents to meet me. The meeting went surprisingly well. It seemed he had briefed them beforehand, because they never brought up my family. Instead, they made it clear that if we both wanted to marry after graduation, they would buy us a home wherever we worked to help ease our financial burden. I'd never envied another family's wealth or power, but I truly admired a household where the parents genuinely loved their children. When Michael's mother held my hand and asked with sincere warmth about my classes and daily life, I almost wanted to nod and agree to marry him on the spot. But once my head cooled, I knew it wasn't the right time. His parents were older, and if my mother ever found out, she would cling to them like a leech. Sure enough, within just a week of moving in with Daniel, She was already trying to cozy up to me over the phone. The truth was, his family had agreed so readily to take her in because they were eyeing her compensation money. But once she was there, they quickly realized she was incredibly stingy. Not only did she refuse to spend money on them, but she also wouldn't lift a finger to help. Every day she just ate and lounged around, refusing to do any chores. Daniel's mother grew increasingly resentful. She began looking for reasons to pick fights with my mother, hoping she'd leave on her own. But as the saying goes, inviting a god in is easy. Sending them away is hard. I fueled the tension by calling my mother and encouraging her. Just stay there. You get free meals and don't have to work. Let them talk all they want. A few insults don't cost you anything. She found my reasoning sound but still hated feeling powerless in the household. She started telling everyone about my father's death, Daniel's promise to take care of her, and how his mother treated her poorly. The gossip spread quickly, and soon Daniel was being whispered about whenever he went out. Furious, he came home and argued with his mother, who was already bitter about feeding another mouth. The fights grew more frequent until their home was filled with shouting day and night. A year passed before I got a call from our hometown telling me my mother had been beaten, and I needed to come immediately. At the hospital, I asked which room she was in, and was told I needed to pick up her medical report first. The injuries weren't severe, just some bruising and a small cut on her forehead. But when I saw the blood test results, my breath caught in my throat. My mother had blood type B. My father had type O, yet mine was type A. My hands trembled as I clutched the paper, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. I rushed to the restroom, splashing cold water on my face, trying to steady my shaking. My mind was racing with dark possibilities, but I needed hard proof. Once I had composed myself, I fixed my expression in the mirror and walked into her room. The moment she saw me, she hurled a water bottle at my head. I dodged just in time. "So you actually remembered to come back, useless brat. I raised you for what? If I'd known, I would have thrown you in the river to drown when you were a baby." Her words hit me like a slap. But all they did was bring back every single memory of what she had done to me, not only in this life, but in the one before. I wanted nothing more than to grab her and force the truth out of her. Struggling to keep my voice steady, I asked quietly, "You're back now, aren't you? Who hit you?" I should have known the answer before even asking. It was that wretched woman, Helen Carter. She was Daniel's mother. As it turned out, things had escalated so badly between the two of them that they had gotten into a physical fight. Why would she attack my mother? Where was the rest of the family? Did they just leave her lying there after hitting her? My mother avoided my gaze, refusing to answer. Her silence only deepened my suspicions. I decided I needed to confront Daniel's family directly. The moment I arrived at their house, before I could say a single word, Helen pointed straight at me and unleashed a torrent of insults. "You filthy little tramp, just like your mother. How dare you show your face here, if I don't tear you apart. I'm not Helen Carter." My brows furrowed, my voice turning ice cold. "What exactly do you mean by that? You hit my mother and think you're in the right," she sneered. "So what if I did?" That shameless old woman climbed into my husband's bed. "You're lucky I didn't kill her. If she's going to seduce a man, she'd better take a look at herself first." Then she shoved me hard toward the door and slammed it in my face. It only took a few words for the truth to sink in. My mother had slept with Thomas Carter, Daniel's father, and that's why Helen had attacked her. The revelation was shocking, yet strangely liberating. A few days later, I found a quiet place to cry, until my whole body shook. In my hands was the DNA test confirming what I had suspected all along: I wasn't their biological daughter. The bitterness and resentment I had carried for 2 lifetimes evaporated in that moment. I felt strangely grateful to be free of any blood ties to them. It meant they could no longer use family as a weapon to keep me bound to their cruelty. As for my biological parents, I didn't dare hope too much. I'd read enough stories to know how often unwanted baby girls were discarded without a second thought. If that was my reality, I'd rather have no parents at all. When my tears finally dried, I steadied my heart. Every wound, every humiliation I had endured across 2 lives deserved retribution. After my mother was discharged from the hospital, I took her back to Daniel's house. Helen was waiting at the door, blocking our way, spitting out venomous insults. I spoke plainly. "We've kept quiet out of respect for the children in this family, but if you keep this up, I'll call the police." "You assaulted my mother. That's a criminal offense." Daniel rushed out, trying to calm his mother and usher us inside. Not seeing Thomas anywhere, I asked coolly, Where is he? Does he think he can hide after what he's done? That's not what a real man does. Once everyone was finally in the same room, I spoke with measured coldness. My mother and your father had an incident. How do you plan to address it? Helen jumped up livid. Your mother should be ashamed. If anyone needs to explain themselves, it's her. I smiled faintly, my tone dripping with sarcasm. Do you really think you get to decide how this goes? Let's be clear, my mother says she was forced. Look at her injuries. They're evidence enough. And wasn't there already a past case of attempted assault in your family? Like father, like son. I'm sure the police would be very interested in reopening that file. The mention of that old scandal made the color drain from their faces. Even though no conviction had come from it, the time spent in custody had left scars. Daniel, clearly nervous, stepped in quickly. Mom, calm down. I'll apologize on her behalf. Please, let's resolve this peacefully. Under the weight of my accusations and the threat of legal action, they finally agreed to sign a written statement admitting Thomas had assaulted and beaten my mother and promising to provide for her care and treat her well from now on. As they signed their names, relief washed over their faces, but I only smiled inwardly. Fools, I didn't leave right away. Instead, I started asking around the old neighborhood, talking to relatives and neighbors, piecing together the story of my own origins. At the same time, I made frequent visits to Daniel's house, always with a casual word or a sharp reminder, keeping the tension burning. Soon enough, that household found no peace at all. On my way back from their house today, I caught Daniel Carter holding another woman in a narrow alley. The moment I saw her face, I couldn't help but smile to myself. In my previous life, this woman was infamous in the entire county. She was a widow from the neighboring town, raising a young son, who later remarried. But when her new husband worked away from home, she couldn't stand the loneliness and ended up having an affair with her own father-in-law. And now, in this life, she was entangled with Daniel. If they could actually get married, I thought the show that would follow would be quite entertaining. From what I had gathered over the years, I knew that my parents once worked at a construction site in California, and I was born shortly after they returned, just a few months old. The details beyond that were blurry, and no one seemed to know for sure. I told Michael Anderson about it, and he promised to help me find out more. The day before I was supposed to leave, my mother pulled me into her room for a private talk. It turned out Daniel had come to her asking to borrow money, $10,000. I immediately wanted her to agree to the loan, because if he really married that widow, I would have a front row seat to the drama. But convincing my mother was never easy. An idea sparked in my mind. I leaned closer to her ear and whispered my plan. Her eyes widened in disbelief. Are you sure about this? Helen Carter will never agree, she said. I smiled. You don't have to worry about that. If it works, you'll go from guest to mistress of the house. If it doesn't, you lose nothing. My mother liked the sound of that. In her mind, a woman always needed a man to live well. That evening when the family was gathered, my mother spoke up. Daniel, if you want to borrow money from me, it's not impossible. His eyes lit up. Mom, just say what you want. I'll do it, she replied coldly. Get your parents divorced and then marry me. What, you shameless old woman? Helen Carter exploded, nearly lunging at my mother. Your husband is dead, and now you want to steal mine. My mother wasn't fazed in the slightest, and I stepped in with a calm tone. That's not the right way to see it. My sister is gone, and if you want to marry someone else, we wouldn't object. But with the way your family's finances are right now, how long would it take to pay the money back? If you marry someone else, our families cut ties for good. Do you think my mother wants to marry a broke old man? Helen Carter ground her teeth. Don't even dream about it. You'll never take my place, I smirked. Then Daniel can just stay single for the rest of his life, staying loyal to my sister and taking good care of the kids. That works too. Daniel clearly wanted to marry the widow, but asking him to push his mother to divorce was a tough spot. He muttered something about how his mother had sacrificed her whole life for the family, and if he did this to her just for his own marriage, what kind of person would he be? Then he turned to my mother with pleading eyes. Mom, you know how I feel about you. You're getting older, and I can't let you work so hard anymore. If I remarry, there'll be another pair of hands to help you with the kids. I cut in smoothly. Daniel, my mother isn't heartless. Even if it's a divorce, like she said, it's only on paper. In reality, you'd still live together like now. It's just a matter of changing the documents. That seemed to get him thinking. I left them to discuss it among themselves, confident I knew these people well enough to predict the outcome. Sure enough, the next day, they had agreed, almost too eager to wait. Once my mother had completed the marriage registration, I reminded her that she was now the mistress of the house and needed to keep expenses under control. I told her clothes should be hand-washed to save water and electricity. Besides, they'd come out cleaner. Back in the day, Helen Carter had demanded the same thing during the freezing winter, so I told my mother to apply it now. I caught the hateful looks from my two nieces and simply smiled. Without my help to guide and support them with their average abilities, they would never make it into a prestigious college or land a good job. As for the older girl, living in a family that valued sons over daughters meant she'd never be truly cherished. In my previous life, I had poured so much care into them only to be met with betrayal. This time, I simply let them deal with the consequences of facing an unpredictable mother. Not long after I returned to school, Michael Anderson found information about my biological parents. Tomorrow would be the day I met them, and my heart was a mix of nervousness and anticipation. Michael held my hand gently, his voice calm yet reassuring, telling me that no matter the outcome, he would always be by my side. At the restaurant where we had arranged to meet, I couldn't help but feel a lump in my throat when I saw faces that shared pieces of my own features. "I'm so sorry, my daughter," the woman said, tears streaming down her cheeks as she pulled me into her arms. "It was my fault. I lost you. I've wronged you for too long." She was my birth mother, trembling and sobbing as if the years of separation had just crashed down on her. I froze, unsure how to respond. My emotions tangled in disbelief and tenderness. Beside her, a middle-aged man's eyes turned red, silent tears slipping down his face. My birth father. Standing near them was a couple about my age, and the woman's eyes mirrored mine almost perfectly. She was my older sister. After the tears had slowed, we sat down together and began to talk. My mother recounted that when I was only a few months old, she had taken me to the market in a stroller. She looked away for just a moment, and in that brief lapse, I was kidnapped. For all these years, they had spent every dollar they could and exhausted every effort to find me. To prove it, they brought along old newspaper clippings with my missing notice, as well as online posts from later years when technology had made the search easier. Seeing that evidence, I couldn't stop my tears. I wasn't an abandoned child, after all. I was deeply loved and desperately missed. I had a real family who had never stopped looking for me. That realization filled me with warmth I had never known before. My parents comforted me even as they cried themselves, and the entire day together melted away much of the initial awkwardness. That night, my mother insisted on sleeping beside me. She wrapped me in her arms, telling stories about the day I was born, and cried until her voice trembled. I cried with her. The next day, I went home with my birth parents. Michael stayed close to me, never leaving my side. The first thing we did was go to the police station to file a report. I had been kidnapped as a child, and the people responsible needed to be brought to justice. Back at their home, I learned that my father had once been a small-time construction contractor. During the housing boom years, he had worked tirelessly and managed to build a solid fortune. When I saw the sprawling mansion over 10,000 square feet, Michael leaned in and whispered in my ear, "Samantha, from now on, I'll just rely on you. Don't worry, I promise I won't be a freeloader." I shot him a look that said, "Don't even joke about that." Soon, relatives began arriving to welcome me home, each bringing gifts. When they saw I had brought my boyfriend, they teased that they'd prepare a gift for him later. My sister, 5 years older than me, was already married and had a sweet 3-year-old daughter. The little girl toddled over, wrapping her soft arms around my legs. "Auntie," she said with a shy smile, "welcome home. I'll give you all my candy." As for my adoptive parents, they were soon arrested and confessed everything. Years ago, they had left our town to work elsewhere. My adoptive father had worked briefly on my father's construction site, but was fired for being lazy. Holding a grudge, he happened to see my mother out with me one day and kidnapped me, not only out of spite, but also because the gold bracelet on my tiny wrist tempted him. Initially, they had planned to sell me to another family, but the trafficker they had contacted was arrested. With no other choice, they took me back to their hometown, claiming I was their biological daughter. My adoptive mother was sentenced to 3 years in prison and ordered to pay my family $50,000 in compensation because she didn't have the money. The debt became a shared burden for her entire family, including her new husband, Michael's stepfather. The story of a mother-in-law marrying her son-in-law's father became the talk of the entire community. People joked they didn't even know whether to call my nieces and nephews grandchildren or great-grandchildren. While I was busy preparing for my wedding to Michael, My birth parents remained furious over what my adoptive family had done. They spent money to make life as difficult as possible for them. After my adoptive mother was released from prison, her family began turning on each other, screaming, and even coming to blows. By then, I was already a few months pregnant. Both my mother-in-law and my birth mother hovered protectively around me, worried I might slip and fall, even while walking to the bathroom. I had a family who loved me fiercely, a husband who adored me, and soon a precious baby on the way. For me, that was more than enough.